What is the most unethical thing you've been asked to do at work? I worked at a well-known automotive garage chain. I quit on my second day on the job because while I was doing an oil change, my manager told me to take out the customer's air filter, rub it on the ground outside and show it to the customer so they believe it needs to be changed. As a customer, I changed an air filter myself an hour before I took it in for an oil change, and I was suggested to replace it because it was dirty. I showed them the receipt, and they said, "Well, the entire system makes it dirty, you see." I was asked to ignore 15 open 50-gallon drums that were filled with used phosphoric acid sitting out back of a workshop next to a stream. In the middle of a city, heavy rains and hurricane winds tipped a few over one night. The boss dumped one out on the ground because he needed the drum. When I quit, I called the city on their butts. I used to work in event management and was asked to ignore fire safety violations on a regular basis. One time we hosted a funeral for a sort of local celebrity with about 3,500 people in attendance, at a venue that was licensed for 300. It was frighteningly obvious that any sort of mass panic would be absolutely disastrous, so the two staff members decided to go behind management's back and call the police. Another time, the boss at a venue refused to repair a broken heater in the middle of winter, with outside temperatures being well below freezing. He told the staff to simply use the gas oven to heat. CO poisoning is a big risk, especially since this is an industrial-strength oven meant for professional catering we're talking about. Where I am, it's illegal to operate an oven like that without a suitable ventilation system in place, which would have needed to be turned off in order to heat the place up. I'm in IT. I was asked by an executive to delete very incriminating emails he had sent to an innocent receptionist from our Exchange server. He thought they were private and she was talking about suing. He sent this request over email. I sent it to our HR and investigative units. Anytime there's a firefight or shooting incident in a war zone, afterwards you routinely have to fill out sworn statements as to how the events went down, who shot whom, etc. Let's just say there's a lot of top-down pressure and coaching beforehand, and nobody fills those out truthfully. That's simultaneously shocking and not surprising at all. That's how armies maintain the appearance that they're the good guys in any given engagement, maintain the appearance of competence to their superiors, and try to sweep friendly fire cases like Pat Tillman under the rug. Pretty shifty. I worked graveyard shift at a gas station. The owner came in under the influence one night and we were chatting. We talked about benign things and I mentioned that I just found out I was pregnant. The first thing he said was, "Good, then I wouldn't have to use protection." I was so taken back that I didn't say anything. He went on to ask me if I had tattoos in any place that he couldn't see. Then he commented on my necklace. It had tiny handcuffs on it. He asked if that's how I liked it, handcuffed. After all that and me refusing his requests politely, he said, "How much money do I have to get out of the ATM to have you tonight?" My response was he'd better go home to his wife and kids before I called them to let them know where he was. He threatened to fire me. The next day, my manager pulls me aside and asks what happened. Then he asked if I would just keep it to myself. I told him he would if he'd take me off graveyard shifts. That's how I got to keep my job and work better hours. I could make a list, but we'd be here a while. I used to work in a senior home which claimed to be independent living for the extraordinarily wealthy kind of old people. And let me tell you, that place was a prison. Kitchen was regularly below health standards and the place was a gosh darn rip-off for our residents. Our boss's stepmom moved in and was unable to move, and liability-wise we weren't able to help her with anything. However, boss would make an exception calling it above and beyond care. Screw that, if she fell we all knew our butts were on the line. Also, illegal petty cash boxes and hundreds of off-the-book expenses for the boss. My buddy used to keep the books there and he actually gave up on asking how much he was doing that was illegal. Be very careful about what senior homes you send your loved ones to, people. Not me personally, however, I was an assistant manager of a sports bar a few months ago. The owner's son and general manager of my store allowed an 18-year-old to serve booze. 19 is the minimum in my state, and she failed to card and served an underage person who got in a wreck. That person's car was totaled and she sustained severe injuries but lived. The owner's son called the other girl who was working on that shift, who was of legal age, and told her verbatim, "I want you to go home and practice saying in the mirror, I was your server and I carded you. She thought she had no option but to go along with it, and I had to be the one to tell the server what her boss was asking to do was commit perjury, and that if she did it, she'd go to jail, have a record, and wouldn't be able to so much as get a job at Walmart when she got out. Screw that guy for trying to ruin another person's life because he made a horrible mistake. The manager wanted me to clean the bathrooms, but he was being kinda weird, so I said no. Turns out a homeless person had smeared crap and blood all over the walls. I told him later he was required to get a hazmat team to take care of that. I'm not risking getting any number of diseases. He just got some other rube to do it. Similar thing happened to my friend at Macca's, except I'm pretty sure it wasn't a homeless person. She was only 14 and the manager refused to even give her gloves. Another older employee threatened to get him fired if he tried to make anyone else clean the bathroom without following procedure. He backed down, but the woman got him fired anyway because he was a power-hungry craphead who liked to use his position to get the younger employees to do questionable stuff. The amount of factory managers that want the light curtains, area scanners, and other safety features disabled on their machines in the name of speeding up production is pretty appalling. That crap's there for a reason, and if I disable it, my butt is on the line if or when your employee gets killed. I work in documentary production, and part of my job is to do annotated scripts for big international networks. I'm sure a lot of people here watch them. This is where you'll have to give references for every single line in your script to prove to the network that what you've written is 100% factual. There was a line written by the scriptwriter and director that was not quite factual due to the way it was worded. I suggested the line be reworded, but he was adamant to have it that way. So of course the network came back to us and said either change the line or find a more concrete source. I searched and couldn't find a source backing it up because of course the line wasn't factual. The director asked me to make nice with one of the experts in the topic and have him sign off on the line as a fact. I refused to do it, but the director went ahead and did it himself, and the line made it into the final film. I get very frustrated every time I see the film on TV and hear the line. When I worked in manufacturing, I would get sent into places inside running machinery because I was small and had small hands. Many of those spots were also for confined space-trained people, which I was not. If you hesitated, they would scream at you from behind, which is super helpful in a confined space when you're trying not to lose your fingers in a belt. Oh, and I made $8 an hour with no benefits. No wonder they sent all those jobs to China. This was early 2000s in Wisconsin. I was a temp making pots and pans on the third shift. My boss was useless and a butthole. He ended up getting demoted to a regular worker, but was too lazy to keep up, so he was fired eventually. I did keep all my fingers, but I almost lost my scalp once. My hair got caught under a running belt. Luckily, I thought fast and grabbed my ponytail and let it take a chunk of hair instead of the whole thing. It was crappy, but I've since learned that you shouldn't do something just because someone in authority tells you to. Thank goodness that the author specified they worked in the 2000s in Wisconsin, because otherwise the narrator would have assumed from this story that they were working in a Victorian mill in old London, back when sending people into moving machinery blades was the norm. I got told to cut an employee's hours, so he dropped to part-time status. That way, the company, more accurately that store in particular, wouldn't have to pay the cost of his insurance. He had recently just got back from having major colon surgery and was deemed a risk. The worst part was I needed this guy to work full-time in department, and I had a whole team of people itching to take vacation since we worked the holidays short-handed. Anyways, joke was on the company. Immediately after I was told to do this, I reached out to a rival company and jumped ship within 2 to 3 weeks. They ended up having to give surgery guy hours once I left. I haven't personally been asked to do anything illegal, but I work at a workers' comp insurance company. The amount of employers who won't report employee injuries is staggering. I've had family members call, sobbing and begging for us to pay medical bills for injuries that occurred at work, but they can't report the claim, so there's nothing we can do. We have employers who tell their employees that it's too late to report, and they think they're just crap out of luck. Guys, if you ever get injured at work, it has to be reported. There's no such thing as too late. Your claim needs to be reported. I used to work in construction as a fire protection services inspector. I'd say I was asked to ignore something dangerous about 1 out of every 3 sites. They also thought nothing of asking me to ignore it like someone else has before. I'm talking about things like an entire sprinkler system not actually being connected in a brand new building, or fire exits that don't exist. How about alarm systems that evacuate the wrong floor when smoke is detected? Apparently, I was a B-word for refusing to issue a fire safety certificate until errors like this were fixed, things that usually take about an hour to fix, which I was happy to wait and watch them do. I was asked to sleep with the health inspector to get us a pass. Cheap motel. A lot of sketchy things, including but not limited to working girls, gambling, bending of the liquor license. All these went on there, but I worked the front desk and was told, "If any ethnic people want a room, tell them we're full." I did not comply, and 1 or 2 times I was confronted and I just said, I didn't notice they were ethnic. I lasted 6 months there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Years ago, I was working at a local pharmacy. The owner had always seemed like a revenue above all else kind of guy, often ranting at us pharmacy technicians about not making enough money. One day we had a patient come in with a prescription for an expensive medicine. So I tried to fill the prescription, but I noticed that our inventory for this rarely filled medicine was expired. I was filling out forms for new inventory when the owner saw what I was doing and told me to fill the prescription with the expired stuff. I tried to explain, but he silenced me with a glare. I looked to my co-workers for support, but they averted their glances. I ended up filling the prescription, but to this day I feel ashamed for not taking a stand against it. I quit the job a week later. I got asked to lie to customers, repeatedly, although this was a sales role, so it was more or less par for the course. If we worked over 40 hours, we wouldn't get time and a half, but we would get that money in an envelope in cash with no taxes taken out. So it sort of worked out. That's not legal. We would get a lot of stray cat dumps, and as you can imagine, it's very costly, but we did it anyway because you can't run an animal hospital and not love animals. Cats don't have Amex cards. Some strays were not very adoptable. We had a senior cat on a lot of meds that suffered seizures, and a weirdo wire-haired chihuahua that took a very long time to warm up to people. She bit, but had no teeth. And a house cat that had feline transmissible diseases. We had them for years. The pets, not the disease. The owner was bought out by a corporation. The first thing the corp wanted to do was bring all of the strays, even the residents, to the Humane Society. We fricking rioted. It took them a year to get them out one by one without causing too much upset, but I tell you this, none of them went to a shelter. I worked at a medical practice and the doctor would just throw medical waste and bags of used needles in the dumpster out back, instead of properly disposing of it. I still don't understand why. He could have lost his license and got slapped with thousands of dollars in fines. Just goes to show, even if you graduated from Columbia Medical School, you can still be a total fricking idiot. Not me, but my dad was asked to commit fraud in order to keep the company he was working for afloat. Ended up doing it and accumulating $16 million in fraud over the course of more than 10 years. And yes, he was jailed. He cooperated with the feds though, so he got less time. It would suck if I blew that secret on the internet. Folks, if a high-ranking boss ever asks you to do this, get them to sign an order or send an email detailing what they'd like you to do, and then immediately take it into the IRS or the equivalent. They're willing to get you sent to jail to keep their business afloat, so return the favor. I worked for a packaging company that made the pop-top caps for bottled water. They asked me to investigate altering the design of their caps so that it couldn't be reused. The idea or scheme was that if they invented a pop cap that would pop up but not back down again, they could market it to the bottled water companies as something that would force people to drink their product in a single sitting, and therefore be more likely to purchase another one later in the day, and prevent people from refilling the bottle from the tap because the lid would never close again. It was only half-heartedly thrown out there at a meeting, but everyone looked a bit uncomfortable about it and luckily it wasn't pursued. Which is just as well because as someone who thinks that bottled water is a rip-off and bottled water companies are wasting crap loads of plastic, I would not have been happy about working on that project. Working at a bar and restaurant, yeah, just cut the mold off those strawberries. Do it quick, we need them for the daiquiris. Followed sometime later by, you're cutting too much off. I was asked not to hire black people or out-of-shape people. Safe to say, I quit not long after that. Perform tasks I wasn't authorized for at all. I'm CNA and I can't tell you how many times a family member of a patient has demanded that we do the nurse's work or the physical therapist's work. Some of it I knew how to do in basic, but if I would have gotten it wrong and hurt my patient, it would have been on me. I was asked to blame a client team member for a mistake I made as there was a financial implication to my company if it was one of our team members who was at fault. I didn't consider doing that once though. I went above the person who asked me and told him it was my fault, and I think it actually worked out to my benefit long term. As a manager, I was asked to tell my 16-year-old coworker that he wasn't allowed to drink water while he was working the fryer in the summer because a customer saw him taking a sip and said it, quote, upset her. Yeah, safe to say I didn't repeat that order. Someone asked me to remove the password from their deceased daughter's laptop so they could see if there were any pictures on it. Apparently, the daughter had tried to rescue her boyfriend who'd been dragged out to sea. Neither could swim, and both drowned. I'm my own boss, so nobody made me, but boy was it an ethical conundrum. I've been in similar situations. What I do is unlock it privately, make sure there's nothing overtly damaging to their memory, like racy pictures or documents on how to kill people, and then give it back to them. It means so much to someone who lost someone they love to get pictures back. Plus, you can do someone who's gone a solid and protect their memory. That's really awesome of you. My best friend, who often watches these videos, hi Jay, has been instructed to completely destroy my phone and delete a specific folder on my computer. I'm not a bad person, but there's a lot of old conversations or journal writings or photos that I like to have for myself, but I would never want my daughter to find them. Huh. I was asked to schedule my bathroom breaks as I was going to the bathroom too many times during the day. When I was asked to write advertising copy for homeopathic children's medicines. Oh, and fluoride-free toothpaste, which does jack all to protect teeth. Background: busy fast food restaurant right at the end of the lunch rush. There was some bread sitting on the counter and my manager asked me to put it in the cabinet where it went. As I was putting it away, a customer came up to me and said, "Excuse me, but that bread was on the floor and someone picked it up and set it on the counter." I apologized and moved it back out of the cabinet and asked my manager about it just in case the customer was confused or something else. Her response? "Oh, just wait for the customer to leave and put it away once they're gone." Nope. I'm sure there have been worse things, but I recently left my job as a barista. There were a handful of times when we dealt with an offensive customer and I was asked by another barista to decaf their drink. I never did. The thought offended me even more because I take a lot of pride from my work ethic. Besides, I didn't want to lower myself to how a customer treats us, and it's not like I knew what they'd been going through either. Well done to you, you're a much more considerate and honorable person than the narrator. Personally, whenever I had customers like this, the only thing stopping me from pulling crap like decaffing their coffee was the fact that everyone could see what I was doing, and I'm too much of a coward to risk getting caught. The malice to screw with someone's orders I totally possess. In short, I had to sell booze to a drunk man with a bad ID, and I quit. I was working at a part-time job at a local gas station chain a few months back to make some extra cash. Near the end of my shift on my third day, I had a very drunk man come up to the counter to buy 2 large cases of beer. I asked him for his ID and it was shredded, taped back together and outdated. He kept insisting he was a regular and it would be fine. I asked my trainee manager for help and she actually made me sell booze to this guy. I tried to protest, but she told me it would cost me my job if I didn't. I admit I made the sale, but I immediately went on break and called the GM and the person above them, and they refused to do anything. So I finished the remaining hour and quit. I've been asked to cook chickens that didn't smell too good. You know those recycle bins at supermarkets? The glass ones get rather dangerous when you're transporting usually 20 to 30 pounds of sharp, broken glass to the back of the truck to go to a plant. My former bosses expected me to do that myself in pouring rain or snow, where I had to lift the container practically over my head to dump in this bigger container. All for minimum wage. Screw that. As a doctor in the ICU, I have to continue treating a patient who is clearly dying and has no chance of survival because family members who know nothing about medicine get to make the decision and they don't want the person to die. So a person with no chance of survival is subjected to all sorts of invasive procedures, medications that will end up having no effect, in addition to the CPR, which is quite a violent procedure and will not save them, but it will break their ribs, among other things. I view this futile medical treatment as unethical. If someone can't survive, why am I pretending to save them by going through these motions, which is doing nothing to help? We were loading a truck late one night when one of us noticed a girl lying in a nearby parking lot, having some kind of seizure. It was already late, the parking lot was empty, and there was nobody else around other than us to go render some assistance. She might have laid there for hours if none of us had offered to help. Nevertheless, our boss told us to mind our own business and finish loading the truck. I said to myself, I'm not going to just ignore someone who could be dying, so I started towards the parking lot. But my boss began insisting that I was on his time and that I would do what he told me to do. I told him to take me off his time and continued over to the girl in the parking lot. It was a long time ago, and now that I remember, my boss did call 911 when we saw her lying there, so he wasn't exactly just going to leave her there, he just didn't want any of us going over and getting involved. We had a flood at a Ford dealership I worked at. The parts department was below ground and under about a foot of water. My boss asked me to gather older inventory that he couldn't send back and soak it down with a hose. His plan was to add it to the insurance claim. It was about $15,000. I refused as it was blatant insurance fraud. He didn't push it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.